Video. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Kay, and thank you so much for having me. It's delightful to be with you all in such a beautiful venue as well. So really I thought I'd just tell you about myself and how I found myself to be the executive director of this great company. And I'll just start by saying I don't say that lightly. State Opera South Australia is a remarkable company. 20 years ago this month, the company presented the Ring Cycle in 2004, which was incredibly ambitious for a company of the size that it is. And that was a new ring cycle created here. Of course, 6 years earlier in 98, they presented an international production as well. From that to Moby Dick, Dead Man Walking, some really ambitious projects that have celebrated and brought this great art form to this wonderful city. And I also will share I suppose my thoughts as a relatively new resident. So how it all started, Bachelor of Education QUT, and then I'm not sure how it works here, but in Queensland they just sort of, in the state system, tell you where you're going. And they let me know that I would be moving to Junda, which is a terrible name for a place, really. And Junda is 219 kilometres southwest of Longreach. I was based in Junda, and I spent 3 days a week at Junda State School, 1 day at Windora and 1 day at Stonehenge. And the reason for that is that these three schools had a combined population of roughly 30 students, so average 10 each. Stonehenge was 6, Junda was a bit bigger. So they were all one teacher, teaching principal schools, and those principals also had to run the school, so I was their second teacher on a revolving level. Now, a Bachelor of Education with a music major in my undergrad, you'd think maybe they'd pick up on the fact I was interested in arts, but they went, I think you can focus on science and PE, because they gave me exactly what they didn't want to do. So I did that, and then certainly not trying to claim it's due to my brilliance, just the fact that no one wanted to be there. At the halfway through my second year as teaching, I was appointed to as a principal of Stonehenge State School. And Stonehenge, I'll show it. So that is the school there, but I took that photo about 2 years ago. It wasn't quite as fancy back then. But why is it called Stonehenge? People always ask. It's actually a sort of cute story. The first settlers that went there built a house. We're talking sort of Sydney Kidman time here. Built a house out of stone, and it burnt down. And what was left was just sort of the stone walls, but the roof and where the windows, and obviously, so it had somewhat of a Stonehenge look to it. So that's where it is on a map. And then if I zoom in, that's the town. So it had, I think, 7 houses, a pub, no shop, but there was an IGA 190 kilometres away, and you could fax through your order. And an airstrip for the RFDS, obviously. And the RFDS would come monthly and do a clinic. So that was your GP service. And I'll never forget this. It was like my second week there, and there was a knock on the door, and this lady introduced herself. You'd think I would have known everyone by this stage, but I hadn't met Merrin. And Merrin introduced herself and said, "How are you?" And she let me know. She goes, "Are you well?" I said, "I am well." She goes, "Any ailments? Anything?" I'm like, "No, Merrin, really no. Just could you maybe find something, because the RFDS are coming and we don't like them to come all this way if they don't have at least a few people to see." She goes, "Mark, use it or lose it." So it was sort of it was a beautiful community. You could buy milk at the pub, but that was about it. And the pub did do a great meal every night, though, but it was great. I wrote a newsletter when I started there, and I look back at it now thinking how mad I was, but I used to sort of write these quite philosophical things about education, what we should do. And I remember one of the property owners, none of the property kids came to the school. They were all on distance ed or school of the air, and then they will go to boarding school. So it was the town kids, I bring to your attention, the town kids. So I did the newsletter, and it was on the bar, etc., at the pub. And one of the community parents said to me, sorry, not parents, well, she was a parent, but her kids went up to school. She goes, I saw your newsletter. It's fantastic. I said, thanks, Sue. She goes, you're aware that none of the parents of the children that you teach are literate? And that was a pretty big wake-up call as to the community I was working in. Roo shooting was really the only industry. Once a week, a big refrigerated truck would come and take the roos bodies there was a human consumption box and a pet food box, and that's what these kids did. And they would go out and they would shoot with their parents all night, and then they would be sent to school during the day so their parents could sleep. So it was a huge battle, but I worked really hard, and I remember taking them to North Keppel Island for a camp, and of the 7 kids, 6 had not seen the sea. And it was a remarkable experience. But what I really remember is how important arts was in that community. And, in the school concert, of course, we did the carols and everything, but the kids desperately wanted to sing Goodbye Earl by the Dixie Chicks, which is about this woman who was in a domestic violent relationship, and they decided to poison him, and that was the best way of dealing with it. I'm like, it's not really a festive story, is it? But these kids loved it. That's what spoke to them, and that's how we sort of developed that rapport and that trust. And I really loved my time out there. Really quickly, I got a job as a principal of a school called Lundavera down in Gundawindi. It was sort of like, this is the great school. We had the most beautiful tennis courts with a tennis club, and we had this and we had that. And I've driven in, to meet with the community the year before, and everyone either had a Land Cruiser Sahara or a Range Rover because they're all cotton farmers. Do you know what? That was so tough. The expectations on me as an educator there, the expectations that, they're all called things like Ned and Tiggy and sort of Sloaney pony names. And they all, and they wanted to know that this kid was going to thrive at the Southport School or Churchy when they got there. And are they going to be as good as the kids from this school? And it was really hard. It was this huge shift. Trying to work out what to do next. Education Queensland at the time did something that I continue to push, and if anyone knows Minister Boyer, our Education Minister, I've told him many times, it was an initiative under the Beattie government at the time where into each of the major performing arts companies, Education Queensland put a full-time teacher in to try and make a connection between what we were creating in Queensland: ballet, opera, theatre, orchestra, and make a connection to schools and allow people to have that. So on a 3-year secondment, I was sent to Opera Queensland, and I left there 12 years later. The funding was cut after 3 with a change of government, but the incredible 2 people in Gina and Tim Fairfax paid my salary for the subsequent 9 years because they knew how important that work was. And over that period, I delivered opera and opera workshops. And I want to just clarify, when I say opera, I love this art form, but opera is storytelling through song. I've worked with Sarah Storer, the country singer, to write works, with Megan Washington. I'm not suggesting these people will replace our Wagners and our Mozarts, but we need to make it accessible. So that's how that all happened. And my role there went from education to the Director of Learning, Regional and Community. And look, that was fantastic. The last show I created there was called The Frog Prince, which is, was at Tatachilla College yesterday, actually. I brought that one down with me. So they're 3 young South Australian artists in that touring production. And this is when they're at Richmond, I believe, school. So that was really exciting. The education then shifted to, I suppose, learning for all. So touring productions, and I also took up over the corporate work. And I just threw this photo in because for 8 years I produced the opera in the Vineyard. Queensland does have wine; it's dreadful, but it it was in Ballindine, and it was with the Rotary Club of Ballindine, and that was a photo from that. That was when I had David Hobson there. We used to sell 1,200 to 1,500 tickets. It was all during, obviously, as everyone in this room knows, about eradicating polio, and that was what the fundraiser was for. And that was a really special event. And can I say, it is freezing, though, in Stanthorpe. It's freezing. Like, people think it snows there. Not very often, but it does. And Brisbane people love getting rugged up for one day. So that was something that we did. The game changer for us is when my artistic director at the time, Lindy Hume, came to me and said, We're getting good audiences in Brisbane. We're getting good audiences in schools and things like this. But our regional tour is just bombing. Like, it was shocking. And I said, what do we do? And she was a big thinker, Lindy. And she said, I've got an idea. I want to tour Puccini's La Boheme. I'm like, great, that'll always sell. And she's like, I said, but there's a chorus in Boheme. We can never afford to tour a chorus. She goes, you're going to create a chorus in the 9 locations around Queensland. I want 36 adults and 12 children, and you'll need to audition everyone. So I went out with a colleague, Jason Barry Smith. We auditioned over 900 Queenslanders and created this. So that photo was actually from Ipswich, which is not very regional. And Ipswich has the worst theatre of all of them, so we couldn't actually use the full set there. But where we did take it to was the Gold Coast, Toowoomba, Maryborough, Rockhampton, Mackay, Townsville, Cairns and Mount Isa. Mount Isa was incredible. There's a man in Mount Isa who I was only on the phone to yesterday, and I still call him a dear friend. His name is Robbie Catter. He's not as mad as his dad. And he auditioned out there and joined that chorus, and he would drive around in his Land Cruiser and do 3 loops of town to pick up anyone who wasn't able-bodied or couldn't drive to get them there. He was what a true local member should look like, and that was an incredibly special project to do that. Regional touring, we sold 900 tickets in Mount Isa. If you look at that as a percentage of population, it's ludicrous. And then we took smaller shows and we toured them. And this next photo is very special because when I'm not into opera, I'm a bit of a plain nerd. And we were presenting a show called Songs to Die For, a little bit tongue-in-cheek because everyone dies at the opera, and but sort of looked at this idea of where there's still joy in that. And we were presenting it at the Qantas Founders Museum in Longreach, and I always did a little talk at the start of the show. And they said, where do you do your talk from? I'm like, just sort of there. And he's like, oh, would you like to do your speech tonight from the wing of the 747? Which was pretty amazing. So that's that. From there, created the Festival of Outback Opera, which still happens today in Longreach and Winton. This was our first one. That's the original Qantas hangar from, what's Qantas now, 119, whatever year that was, 1920. So that was a concert that we did there. And the other thing I learned with opera, because like anything, if it's not in your cultural capital, you're not necessarily willing to try it. But where we find people are more willing to try is if you take it to a unique location where they feel comfortable. So there's great theatres around Queensland, just as there are here, and I'm looking at doing some touring to Gambia and places like that, and I know how good the Helpman Theatre is, but we'll get to the Helpman Theatre, but I can tell you now, in Gambia I'm going to get more people if I do it in the sinkhole and tell them to bring a picnic. So it's about building that understanding and love of the art form and then inviting them into that more formal space. So where do you do it in Townsville? Because what's Townsville all about? It's about the Cowboys, so you take it to their stadium. And we use just that one end bank of seating, the beautiful Townsville CBD behind. And that particular show was called Are You Lonesome Tonight? And it was a celebration. I'm sure there were people probably Mozart was rolling in his grave, but it was a celebration of opera and country music. And I remember talking about this in LA, and someone said, that is just blatant advertising. You were just trying to say you like country, let's throw this in. And I said, actually, if you look at it, they have a lot in common. They're about storytelling. They're often tales of woe. There is an amazing woman, there's an Australian country singer by the name of Melinda Schneider, but her mother, whose name eludes me right now, is an amazing yodeler, but she actually started an opera and moved across. So there's a lot of that similarity around lifting of the soft palate, etc. So we did that show. I've just realised this photo's in here twice, my apologies, but the one on the left is at the Stockman's Hall of Fame in Longreach. So we launched that show at Beef Week in Rocky. I had sitting 2 seats away from each other. I had ScoMo in one seat and Palaszczuk 2 along, because it's a big event. And it went absolutely mad, and these are the locations that we took it to. So over 9,000 Queenslanders saw it, and if I quickly work down that list, not all of them, but Bowen, we did it down on the waterfront near the Big Mango. Charters Towers, we did it in the stud selling arena at the sale yards, as we did in Roma. Warwick, we did it at the rodeo grounds. where basically everywhere we went, we took it to somewhere iconic where people were just happy to come out and have a go. And what we have seen is a year later, we took a sort of a bel canto work looking at beautiful singing, and they all came back because they trusted us and they were willing to go on that journey a little bit further. That photo is pretty special. That's at the age of dinosaurs outside of Winton. And the next one, we call it our Cathedral of Light, and this was on a cattle station outside of Longreach, and the lighting guy created this structure for us using the light. Of course, every bug from here to Burke came, but it seemed a good idea at the time. So now that's right. I know I've got to wrap up, but just quickly, here I am now. Can I say something about this venue that you have in this city? I truly believe it is the best opera house in Australia acoustically. Dame Jones is a great house, let's face it. You know, it's not to go to and watch the opera, but I don't think there's necessarily a bad seat in this house except for the VIP boxes. That always happens. But it is so special that we can do it acoustically, and something we are committed to doing under my new artistic director, Dane Lam, is we do not use microphones. If you come and see our Lucia, if you saw our Cosy, we won't and we don't. Everything you hear is the human voice and the power of in that house, and that's something to celebrate. I inherited from Stuart Maunder, who I adore, but I don't adore GNS, but I inherited his GNS festival. But you know what? It paid the bills. It was a masterstroke commercially, and that was the opening night of Pirates. There's a sinkhole in Gambia that I think could be the most amazing place too. And it blows my mind. I'm sure most of you have been there, but down the bottom there on the left, they're people. Like, that's how deep this thing is. It is amazing. I'm just not carrying the instruments in. But it's very special. I'm working at the moment with the Lower Air Council. They're wanting to do something at Coffin Bay, you know, with oysters and beautiful South Australian wine and opera down there on the waterfront. And a dear friend of mine and who I've met since being here, and board member Jane Doyle, is very committed to that area, and we're working with her to do it. So that was last year's Salt Festival over there. Just really quickly, the other thing that's done very well for us is our new partnership with Duxton Group, Opera in the Pub. That's one of our young artists, Jess Mills, and basically a Sunday afternoon we do a pub session, and she sings, in her words, opera bangers, and you buy a schnitty and you listen to it and get to engage in it, and that's something that's working really well for us. And it's free. You come, you buy your drinks, and you do that. The challenges, here's the slide that is it. You know what? You don't want to hear it. It's money. It always is. We've not been indexed for 12 years. Think what you could buy 12 years ago and what you can buy now with it. However, you know, I have met personally with our Premier, and what I need them to realise is I adore this beautiful oval, but you can have both. And of course we need sport and we need this because the energy. I'm not really a huge football fan, and I went to the Seven Stars and watched the Lions on Saturday and nearly had a heart attack. Like, it's really exciting, isn't it? It was really exciting. So I get it, but we need more. We need to invest, and audiences and opportunities. Well, that's the exciting part. I'll end on Lucia de Lammermoor. This production will open on the 8th of November. It is the original John Copley that Dame Joan performed in. We found it in 3 shipping containers sitting in Perth. We brought it over. We're tizzing it up. It'll be its last outing, I think, but a really exciting opportunity to see that show. And it's proper, really grand opera. So I will end on that. I'm sorry if I went for too long. Please reach out. I'd love to see you at the opera. I can assure you I'm very committed to this city. I think a lot of the time when people take arts administrative roles in other cities, it becomes a bit of a FIFO thing where I will stay at home, but I'm committed. I've been living here for 2 years. I do fly to Sydney this afternoon, but that's for an opera meeting. But I'm committed to being here, and I absolutely love it and want to see that the next 50 years for this company is as exciting as the first. Thank you.
What a good question.